In the 1970s, Maxine Stafford was known for her work as a professional numerologist in New South Wales, Australia. She was logical, grounded, and had never experienced anything she couldn't explain, until a seemingly routine invitation to give readings at a family party in the Sydney suburb of Greenacre would shift her understanding of reality forever. What began as a typical evening soon veered into something far more unsettling. In the 1970s, Maxine Stafford from New South Wales, Australia, was a professional numerologist. She would give character assessments to clients based on their birth dates, etc., but she knew nothing about psychic phenomena and had never had a psychic experience. That was until she was invited by some friends she knew at a place called Greenacre, a suburb west of Sydney. Maxine was to give some readings for guests at a family party. When she arrived, she was taken to the bedroom at the front of the house, so that when the guests arrived, she would give them each a reading. When Maxine entered the room, she immediately noticed how cold the room was and asked for a heater. They brought her a heater, but it made no difference, and the temperature remained extremely cold. Later that evening, their 18-year-old son called Jim came into the room for a reading, and she mentioned how cold the room was, even with a heater. He calmly said to her the room was always cold because it was haunted. Intrigued, she asked Jim for more details. He said his 17-year-old sister used to sleep in the room until one particular terrifying night 12 months ago. As she was asleep, she was suddenly awoken by a heavy weight bearing down on her body, and his hands were grasping her throat. When she told her family, they all figured it must have been a terrible nightmare, but the following night, the very same thing happened at the same time at 11 p.m. When it happened on 2 more occasions, she was moved out of the room. But whatever it was had followed her into that room, and it happened again. Her parents took her to a doctor, who put it down to a vivid imagination. Jim had no sooner left the room after telling her about the hauntings when Maxine felt something on her back. It was heavy and appeared to be bearing down on her, and she could feel hands grabbing at her throat. She screamed out to Jim, "It's here! It's in the room and on my back!" It started to feel oppressively heavy, and she fought like mad to try and escape it. Jim arrived and could see her distress and quickly ran out to tell the others, whilst Maxine continued to struggle with the unseen force, whatever the hell it was. It felt horrific and overpowering. At that moment, she remembered something that she'd heard from a speaker at one of the recent seminars she'd attended on numerology. He said that because of the type of work she did, it was not unknown for unwelcome entities to be attracted to those who practiced it, and he went about explaining to his audience how to deal with it if such a situation were to occur. At the seminar, she initially thought nothing about what it said, believing she would never find herself in such a position. But here she was, putting everything he said into practice. She shouted loudly, "You have no place here, you are evil, you are dead, go back to where you belong, and never come back." She had no sooner finished her chastisement of the unknown force when the hands immediately let go of her throat and the heavy weight seemed to slither down her back and suddenly vanished. After the ordeal, Maxine found herself shaking. She left the room and walked into the kitchen, where she found the family and their guests huddled together and looking terrified, whilst her 18-year-old daughter looked even more terrified than the others. While Maxine was just as frightened as the family and their guests, she was now more curious than ever to get to the bottom of whatever it was that was haunting the family. In her many readings into the paranormal, she'd once read that people who tried to contact the spirit world using a Ouija board had attracted something more than they'd bargained for in the process, something sinister. She asked the family whether anyone had ever used a Ouija board in the house. The mother immediately said, "Certainly not. I would never allow one of those into the house." But Jim said that he and another sister admitted that one night when the mother was out, a boy from next door had come into the house with a Ouija board, which they played with, but immediately stopped when the board started to rise into the air before flying across the room, and a glass that had been used as a planchette had smashed on the ground. That was all Maxine needed to know, and that incident explained everything. She was more than happy to leave the house that night and quickly left to drive home. When she got into the car, she knew at once that she was not alone. She felt a kind of vibration around her and a feeling of turmoil and trouble. She came to the realization that the frightening entity she had fought in the house was now in her car, and she was petrified. But all of a sudden, and for no apparent reason, she did not feel threatened and felt that it was pleading with her and wanted her help. Although still shaken, she tried the same technique she'd used in the house and said, "You are dead, leave and go back to where you belong, and please leave me alone. You have no place here." But this time it didn't work, and the vibrations got worse. She started the car and drove down the road, but suddenly stopped the car and wound down the window. The vibrations suddenly stopped, and everything was still. She sat there and waited for a while, but nothing happened, and she hoped it had gone. She sat quietly in the car for a few minutes, just to be certain the vibrations did not return, before slowly driving home. After parking the car in the garage, she went inside the house and looked around for her cat, Mimi. She knew that animals were known to be psychic, and figured that if whatever it was that was haunting her was still around, her cat would surely be sensitive enough to pick it up. After locating Mimi, she took her out to the car and placed her inside to see if she would get some sort of reaction, but nothing happened, and she felt calmer now knowing the entity was not around. The following morning at around 8 a.m, she got a phone call from the family at Greenacre, where she had carried out the readings, and was told that it had finally gone. They told her that after she had left the house last night, the house immediately felt different. The daughter that was being haunted by the entity was now relaxed at the thought that it would no longer trouble her. A short time later, she paid the family a visit to discuss what had happened that night, and she was intrigued by what could have caused the frightening ordeal. She asked the family whether there had been any deaths in the street that could have triggered the hauntings. Their son Jim said that when they first moved into the house 3 years ago, an old man had been living a reclusive life across the road from them. At the same time, there was a vacant lot next to their house where young couples liked to frequent, and was called Lover's Lane. There had also been nasty attacks on young women. When the elderly recluse passed away and had not been discovered for a number of days, the attacks also ceased. Could the spirit of the man be the cause of the family's daughter being attacked in her bedroom? And did it then decide to attack Maxine on her drive home? Fortunately for Maxine, there were no further psychic experiences. There is a possibility that when they brought the Ouija board into the house, they'd possibly attracted the negative spirit of the old man.